Hey everyone, so I'm Dan. I'm the CEO and co-founder at a Toronto-based company called Cinchy, which is a play on the word cinch, which means simple. We're about 45 employees and growing strong. We did our Series A late last year, right after the world went into lockdown, and continuing to grow and scale. And today we have over 100 organizations that are using our platform. And what our platform is a Dataware platform, which is what I'm going to talk to you today about, is this emergence of this concept that was actually something that was coined in a book that was published in, I think, 1986, this idea of Dataware. But there's the convergence of a lot of themes in the world of data architecture that are really creating what's going to be a very interesting couple of years to come. So I'm excited to chat with you all today. So first of all, if you're curious about what is the actual right future of data, just look into the past. There was a moment in the past where individual buildings had to generate their own power, and then came this idea of a power grid. The power grid abstracted away the complexity of you needing to know as a building if you're hooking into solar versus nuclear versus hydro versus geothermal. And if you look even at the evolution of that more recently, individual homes can now generate power as a decentralized network, but it's avoiding the need for individual buildings to have to build a power plant as part of every building. And that changed the world. It transformed and enabled simplicity and scale. Well, the future of data needs to do exactly the same thing, because today, every time you build an application, you have to build a new data platform, because every application is a data platform. It has to store data, it has to generate data, it has to integrate data, connect data, protect access to data, provide access to data. It needs to extract intelligence out of data. These are heavy responsibilities for the thousands of applications, knowing that if there's not already an app for that, there will be soon. And apps ain't going anywhere, they continue to proliferate. So the idea of a data grid is something that intuitively makes sense, but how? And how is that different? Well, if you look over the past 40 years, there's been a lot of hype around various data strategies, from data marts to data warehouses to data lakes to data lake houses to data fabric to data mesh to data centricity to master data management, and that list goes on. And they all add value. They all solve individual problems, but it's limited. There's always this period of peak hype where there's expectations that are never met. And the problem, though, is they're not changing how the applications are designed. They're not changing how they manage data. The fact that they even need to manage data, they don't change that fundamental assumption. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a fast and furious view on, I guess, the history of data architecture, at least as it relates to Dataware, in terms of the, why is it the way it is. But if we go back to the early days when new systems were being created for the first time to replace manual processes, no one was thinking that they were creating data silos. They were taking paper-based processes and digitizing them. It was an amazing transformation, huge operational efficiency, lower risk, all good stuff. But then we realized that, okay, these programs, they need to remember information, so they need to store data, and they're going to do that digitally. Then we realized that we can actually get intelligence out of that data where it could be used beyond just acting as a memory for the program. But now all of a sudden, the fact that it's siloed is apparent to us, and we want to break those silos down so that we can get benefit from the connectivity of that data and get new intelligence and perspectives out of that. So along came the idea of data warehousing, starting with top down, going from there to bottoms up, which is basically, do you put the marts before the warehouse, or so on and so forth. But notice that it's not changing how the applications are built. Applications still manage their own data. They still do point-to-point integrations over APIs and ETLs. But we're talking about taking data out of the operational world and making a copy of that in the analytical world, and then providing the reporting and intelligence on top of that. And you'll see that that's a common theme here. But the evolution from physical storage through a warehouse to virtualization of that, where it's a virtual view, but still not changing how the applications are interacting with each other. The further kicking the can down the road with the introduction of the data lake, which is to take the raw data out. Advancements in computational power and reductions of storage costs mean you can just put it in raw form, figure out what to do with it later, but then you realize, well, wait a minute, I need to figure out what to do with it, so I need to actually curate it, I need to organize it, so let's build a hybrid, the lakehouse, take the raw data, and then use that to create the warehouse versus direct from the operational systems. But you run into the same problems, which is First of all, you're not changing the integration story on the left, which consumes half of the IT budget of every company on the planet. And it's hard to create a single concise view of all the organization's knowledge, because who the heck is going to own that? Who creates this master data model for the entire business? The idea of data centricity has now been with us for a little while as a growing movement. The vision here is that individual applications actually don't manage their own data. They pull from a central repository that provides data services on behalf of multiple applications. But again, who owns the central data model, which means any organization of complexity just can't really do this at absolute scale. The data fabric has a lot of hype around that. Like our company has a product that plays in that space as at least partly, but the data fabric has a lot of hype around changing how applications integrate so that they're not doing point-to-point integrations over APIs and ETLs. It's kind of like a network-based architecture where each application connects via the fabric, and through the fabric is how they collaborate with other applications. More recently, those of you who are in tune with the latest and greatest trends would know of Zamak and the ThoughtWorks view on a data mesh, and maybe you're part of the Slack community there. But the idea of moving away from a central monolithic analytical plane data architecture to essentially taking domain-driven design borrowed from software architecture and applying it to data architecture to create the avoidance of a central monolithic architecture is a rapidly growing trend. But again, it doesn't change how the apps are built and integrated. It solves a lot of problems on the analytical plane, but like the others, it's not solving the full end-to-end, absolutely every pain point, every problem that exists. So each of these solutions is kind of like solving an individual side of a Rubik's Cube. And if you've ever played with a Rubik's Cube, you know you solve the blue side, then you solve the red side, and then you're disappointed because you've unsolved the first side that you solved. And you can do that for the rest of your life. And you later realize that solving the cube is not the same as solving the individual side. So that brings us to Dataware, and how is that actually different? Well, for 40 years, we've had hardware, we've had software. There was a moment where we had software before there was, we had hardware before there was software. Software changed things because now you can change the behavior of the hardware without reissuing new hardware. Amazing. But ever since we've had digital systems, the bulk of the complexity when you're buying and building software is the data problem. How do I store it? How do I connect it? How do I protect it? How do I provide access? How do I constrain access? How do I track changes to it? How do I ensure consistency and quality of that? The same problem over and over again, whether it's an HR system, a trading application, if you're in a bank, it's the same problem over and over again. And it's really because we've been missing this concept of Dataware. And what Dataware is, and I mentioned this earlier, that this is a concept that was originally conceived in the mid to late 80s by a smart guy named Gordon Everest. But if you read that book, it's amazing because it talks about the rise of data where it becomes essentially autonomous and independent from any individual application, where humans, like regular users, could be customers, could be employees, can now interact directly with data instead of indirectly, where they're interacting with an application, and the application is written in code, which is then in turn the end user of data. So it's a pretty big paradigm shift where data is the application. Apps still exist, but they become simplified. And I'm talking about new apps that you create, because your existing apps are what they are, but the new ones can now delegate the data management and the integration, all these considerations to the Dataware platform and focus on their core business proposition, like the reason why you're buying or building this piece of software. So what Dataware is, if you think of a definition, it's really a platform-based approach so there's a people and process, but there is absolutely a technology component to it. And its approach, you could build your own Dataware solution. We sell a Dataware solution. There's others that have similar capabilities. So, but it's a platform-based approach, not a point solution-based approach. And it makes it possible for apps and people to collaboratively manage and originate data without needing to create copies, without needing to stand up silos, without needing to do integration. Developers, aka builders of applications, can use Dataware, and by doing so, they avoid standing up new app-specific data stores, and they're using persistence and controls as a service, often over REST, but different platforms would support different protocols. And if you're building your own, that's for you to choose. And business users can use Dataware via a data browser to interact directly with the data, which is a combination of maybe getting access to understand and query and get intelligence out of data that was previously trapped inside of individual applications, but also to make changes to that data, because the controls, as you'll see in a second, are uniquely defined now in the data itself instead of the application code where it traditionally has been defined, but you can also use it to originate data and manage user-managed data, which would, typically organizations may use Excel and Access to create desktop tool-based solutions, what some will call end-user computing solutions, or EUCs, which have a whole lot of operational risk. But what the Dataware really is doing is it's taking concepts, and again, it was originally conceived in the 80s, but a lot of these more recently conceived ideas have very similar overlapping thoughts. But it's I like to think of it as the unification of those things. So if you think of data centricity as a movement, if you think of data fabric as a movement, and you think of data mesh as a movement, each of these things are not so much technologies that you can just buy. They're about people, they're about process, they're about organizational change, and they focus on specific problems. Not all the problems in the world, they don't cure world hunger, but they solve specific problems. So whether you're trying to accelerate digital transformation, enable self-service for the business, or enable federated data governance and automated privacy control, each of these has elements that Dataware kind of bakes into the overall approach. And the difference really is that it's changing how the applications are built, such that a company of the future, when they build applications, they don't have to worry about any of the after effects because they don't have silos, they don't have fragmentation, they don't have integration, they don't have any of those things. And a company of the present who has the exact opposite end of the spectrum, like I used to work in a bunch of big banks. I spent 11 years at Citigroup that had more than 10,000 applications, lots of insane complexity. But it really is a light at the end of the tunnel to allow them to intercept the projects where they're going to be otherwise building new applications and use that to start to create the interconnected fabric and do that gradually as they deliver more and more projects. So I like to think of Dataware is the new oil. The old way of thinking is that you want to be data driven as an organization, kind of like the Borg, where you've got a central collective intelligence, just like your fingers and toes. They just kind of mindlessly listen to your brain. Whereas if you look at how real intelligence works in nature, it's something called collaborative intelligence. And the key word there is collaborative. So the future is one where it's collaboration on data across people, across systems, across generations, across species. But it's becoming an intelligence-driven organization is the real transformation, not just having access to data. But how does it actually work? There's 6 core principles that if you're thinking about a Dataware platform, either buying or building one, there's 6 things that you need to account for. The first is that you need to decouple the data from the applications. So the traditional approach is you have an application, it has a user experience, a system experience, aka APIs, it has business logic, control logic, some type of data abstraction, some type of persistence, could be relational, non-relational, and some type of integrations that are specific to the application model. Whereas if you're using Dataware, the Dataware platform basically owns the controls, the abstraction, persistence, and the integration. And the application can continue to build the user experience, the APIs, the business logic. And I'm using the term pro code here, which is really just a stand-in for whatever language, whatever stack whatever IDE, et cetera, you're using. You can also pair Dataware with low code. Low code's great at building end user experiences. It's not suitable for every use case, but there are many that it can be used for. So that's the first principle. The second is the idea of collaboration replacing integration. So you're using Dataware platform to enable copyless and effortless data sharing across applications. So if you need to build 3 applications and one of them is going to originate data, and then the other two, the second one is going to need read access to that, and the third one is going to need read and write access to that, well, you should only have one copy of that data, even individual data cells, and you're managing access, not copies. And that requires the collaboration platform, the Dataware platform, to support real-time data collaboration in a multi-tenant environment with different, technology platforms all interacting with it in real time. But the difference here is pretty substantial. If you had 5 applications that you're going to be adding, let's say over the next 6 months, on top of, let's say you only had 5 applications to start with a traditional approach, APIs, ETLs, ELT, all the good stuff, you're going to build up to 35 integrations. Whereas if you use Dataware, you're talking about no more than 5. So a net savings of 30. And I don't know about your experiences, but mine is integration ain't cheap. It's not $10. It's sometimes tens of thousands, sometimes even more to do even a single integration. I remember being part of $30 million projects, of which $30 million was integration. So it's pretty substantial if you're able to start to eat away at that. The third principle is managing data as a product. So you're using domain-driven design borrowed from software architecture, but applying it to data architecture where you have data domains that are aligned to your business. Within that domain, you're creating data products. And if you're curious more about this, definitely check out Samak and the ThoughtWorks work. They've done some brilliant things. There's a book that's coming out soon that talks really about this. But Really, it's a way of enabling federated governance so that you can have autonomy across teams, but still enable collaboration. The fourth core principle in Dataware is the movement of controls, whereas traditionally they're in the application layer, but where they rightfully belong is in the data itself. So you can see there's a Joanne here who's interacting with dataset B via application 1, and the controls are implemented through code, but that data may be available via application 2. Maybe it's sent over APIs or ETLs or data replication or data synchronization, but the controls are not guaranteed to be consistent. In fact, they more often are not consistent. And this is just an example of one piece of data, 2 applications. In the real world, if you're a citizen and you deal with a bank, that bank has thousands of copies of your data, and in hundreds, if not thousands of applications that all have different blocks of code. So it's impossible to properly protect data. The only way is to have the controls be in the data itself, so that Hillary here, for example, no matter which applications she's interacting with, is getting to the same controls into the data, and that's guaranteed whether she's using an application 1, application 2, or a reporting or visualization tool. The fifth core principle here is that when you're creating experiences, so think of end user experiences, you want to build them in a non-proprietary way where you're using the metadata but activating it. So metadata meaning business descriptions, even control data, but having the experiences be adaptive to that metadata, to that control data, versus having that be repeated in application code. And then finally, being able to think through when you're designing a Dataware platform or evaluating one around how does it enable composability. And that's really where that separation of data and applications becomes critical, because you may be building apps within your organization and you may be using an app-specific model, but maybe you're buying an app from a vendor and they use their own app-specific model. The installation of software of the future is one where you are mapping the data from the app model to your data product models across your domains, not where you're installing binaries and doing data integration as part of the installation process, which is the huge pain point today that limits organizations' ability to implement rapid change. Now, I'm just looking at the time. I just have a couple minutes here, but very quickly, the architecture of a platform, if you're thinking of designing one or evaluating one, you can logically think of it in terms of like 4 core tiers. You got experiences. So you need the ability to have really whatever code, whatever language, be able to interact with the Dataware platform. And that could be pro code, that could be low code. The creation of a data browser would be something that I would strongly recommend as a capability, which is that metadata-driven end-user experience that allows you to minimize the amount of UI code that you need to do, just make it very adaptive. You're providing the transactional persistence, so not just read data, but read-write transactions, ACID, but at the same time with schema flexibility through plasticity, and providing that as a service, often over REST, to enable that collaboration. And from there, you get into the operational data mesh, which is the governance around that, the data products within domains to enable the decentralized ownership that sits on top of whatever you're using ultimately for storage, and controls, where the expectation, if you're using Dataware, is that all data is version controlled, it's access controlled, the metadata itself is exposed as data and with the same protections, data time machine. And of course, your Dataware platform is going to need to be able to connect data in and out, real-time batch data streaming, all the different patterns there, whether it's SaaS platforms or on-prem platforms or Excel spreadsheets. But being able to move data from the legacy approach where they used to be managed within individual applications and have it now be available via Dataware, so that all future applications don't have to redo the integration. So you can integrate one last time. And if you're thinking about microservices, so sticking with the architecture theme, traditionally every microservice is its own data silo, but if when you pair that with Dataware, it changes it. Your microservices still make sense as your code fabric, but you want to enable the collaboration on data across services so that the apps and the code and the logic are completely separate and distinct from the data, and it has its own separate independent governance model, although generally you're going to align your application code and your data into business domains, so you're going to see kind of a convergence around those two worlds, code and under the context of a product. So the approach to get started is, as you're thinking about this, is as you're taking Dataware and how do I make it real? Well, you're using it to collaborate on data across teams, across humans, sorry, that could be within a team or across teams to replace the use of spreadsheets and other things. It could be to use it to collaborate on data across applications to avoid direct integrations, where it's kind of like a Wi-Fi network where you can hook the individual devices up, and you hook it up once and now it can collaborate with an infinite number of future connections. And in some cases, organizations are using Dataware to collaborate with other companies. Could be suppliers, could be customers, could be partners, could be just really any external party. But these are the collaboration patterns. You're using it to implement solutions. Those solutions could be new business applications. It could be modernizing existing legacy platforms to avoid further tight coupling. It could be augmenting existing solutions, like if you have a fragmented CRM ecosystem or multiple ERPs or multiple HR systems, being able to create a connected, not just view, but a true 360 experience on top of that, where you can add new capabilities and originate new data while leveraging your existing investments, is a great use case for Dataware, as well as whether you're trying to take control of the origination of data. Could be master data sets, reference data, or replacing spreadsheets. So that's what we see as the kind of the popular patterns there. So really just finally, the way to actually bring it to life is you're using it to build new applications. So if you're an organization and you're not building any new applications, you're not doing any new integrations, you're not doing any of that, then you don't need Dataware. If you are, though, it is definitely something that you're going to want to consider. But you're using really the data-centric approach when building applications so that they're not standing up new data silos, but you're using a data fabric approach to connect data in and out of your SaaS and on-prem legacy and strategic applications that today each manage their own data. You're using the Dataware's data browser to provide data access to view and change to employees, maybe partners, and maybe customers as well. You're using it to train and operationalize your AI models. Now, as your Dataware is growing, you're getting more data. How do you govern that? That's where you want to borrow the ideas of the data mesh to enable federated governance and do business domain alignment and data products. And then within an individual data set, that's where you want to introduce the idea of controls embedded in the data itself, that idea of autonomous data that makes it all possible. So you're using access-based collaboration for all new data, and what I'll call last copy integration for existing data, where the act of connecting data to Dataware is the last time you would ever need to do integration, which is the entire purpose of Dataware. So I realize I'm now over and I'm talking pretty quickly, so I'm going to skip over some of this. This is just an example of a use case. This is in the context of CRMs and providing that.
Take your time, mate. All good.
Okay, all right. So actually, I'll just cover this just really quickly then. So this is like an example of a pattern of CRM augmentation where you may be using it for building a first application where you're avoiding a data silo. You're connecting data in and out of existing systems using the access-based collaboration here and using the last copy integration. The key, though, is that first project, if you built your Dataware platform right, should knock out more than half the time and cost. But the second project, it gets more interesting because now you're again knocking out half the time and cost of building your second application. Maybe this is an onboarding experience for internal employees. Maybe it's doing know your customer KYC or things like that. But now, in addition to that, you're going to connect in whatever data is not already connected, but the data that was already connected is instantly reusable. So the second application can use the data from here, here, and here with zero effort, with zero copies, with zero integration. It's access, not copies. And that pattern continues as you connect more and more solutions to that. And as you're doing that, not only are you saving the cost of the building a data platform in every application and the cost of integration, but you're also gaining the accessibility to view and change the data through a central metadata-driven experience via the data browser. Of course, you're able to reuse your existing reporting and visualization tools. You're replacing spreadsheets and UCs. So in the context of using this to connect CRMs together, you're using it to basically drive up revenue, cross-sell, upsell, reduce vendor licensing fees for data that was trapped behind a paywall, and improve control and compliance because your Dataware platform takes care of all those complexities for you. So at Cinchy, so we do have a Dataware platform that takes this to and brings it to life, and we've been using it now for a couple of years. But the way it works is like if you look at where we are today, we have 49 domains, 703 entities, 17,000 attributes. We do have 26 synchronizations with external sources. Those are AKA integrations, but we do the integration once for external data sources, and it can be now used an infinite number of times. We have various queries and APIs that are built, and the most interesting is that we have 2,700 links that are spanning these 49 domains, and these are all integrations that are avoided. So just like a quick sneak peek, this is the live view of that. And you can see basically all of our company's knowledge that I have access to. You know, there's our employees as an example, and employees is this yellow color because it's in our human resources domain. So think of this as just one ownership boundary that has all of our employee data, but I can separately look at our finance data, or I can look at our employee success data, or our category data, or our sales data, or our compliance data, but I can search this. So if I want to find employees as an example, I can locate it, kind of like Google Maps, a satellite view. And it's not just the satellite view, I can go to the street view. But unlike Google Maps, the street view, which is often a read-only copy of data that's old, and look at that, it's timed me out, perfect. But so now I can see the data that's there, and I can even change it if I have any access to that. You can open up data in different experiences, and you can see I'm signed out right now, so it's not doing that. But you get the general idea. That's just a quick sneak peek. But we use it to run the entire business, and lots of learnings in doing that. And the same would be true whether you're using our Dataware platform or you're building your own, because it does actually force the creation of a new methodology around data centricity, and it kind of changes everything. But all for the good is what I would share with you, and that's what we see with our customers. If you're curious to learn more, if you check out our website at cinchy.tv, go to the learning series, because the rest of the stuff is our company propaganda, where we try and convince you to buy it. But if you go to the learning series, that's where we have other guests and people that are deploying Dataware and thought leaders. So like, for example, Dave McComb, who wrote the book on data centricity, and Zamak, who is writing the book on data mesh. So a lot of those superstars are featured in various sessions, and that's it. And we do host them live, so you're welcome to join and join in on the conversation.
For you, what was that light bulb moment that made you decide, you know what, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to put my C-level hat on. I'm going to be a co-founder. Was there a moment? Was there a problem? Was there a light bulb moment for you that made you think, yeah, you know what, I'm going to give this a shot?
So I don't know if there was one moment versus a million moments that created a critical mass. It's like a black swan event. It's not about one thing. It's about 1,000 things that all accumulate into one outcome. But so I think for me, it was, I used to work in banks, and seeing the fact that every time I would build a new application, I would be doing the same things over and over again. And it was kind of fun at first, because then you can basically screw up the first application, do a better job on the second one, and kind of learn and get better at that. And I became quite good at that. But it gets a little bit tedious and boring when you realize that everyone's just doing the same thing over and over again. And so that's where seeing the opportunity and the initial experimentation as an intrapreneur to try and create, use whatever tech was available to hack together a solution that acted as an accelerator or shortcut can only take you so far. And if you want to do anything that is outside of the core competency of your business that you're employed with, you have to create your own business. So it's kind of a necessary next step if you actually want to do something about that. So, but yeah, if any of you have any problems that you feel on a day-to-day basis and you think you know the solution, then definitely consider solving it.